So you want to know the benefits of intermittent fasting? Well, in today's episode, we're going to answer some really, really great, very common questions that have been asked. We're also going to talk about our experiences and what we've learned since starting intermittent fasting. All that and more coming up right after this. We are the gym that teaches people how to move instead of just exercise, because we believe that health is about performance, not just body image. And hey, if we haven't met, my name is Yanni Baumeister. This is my brother Rad Baumeister, and we are Unity Gym. We got Richard behind the camera as usual, running the show, and we are the gym that teaches people how to move and nourish instead of diet and exercise. And our belief is that for maximum nourishment of the body, you should be intermittent fasting. And today we're going to talk about why. But first, how are you doing, Rad?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, it was looking forward to another week. It's April.
Testing week here at Unity
April
Gym in the
Fools.
FMS program.
Yeah, I won't be able to test as much as I'd like to today because my shoulder's still recovering, but it's a hell of a lot better, so looking forward to fixing that up.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, we do, if you haven't followed us for long, we do 6-week mesocycles in our program, and the first week of every mesocycle, every new cycle, is testing week, where we sort of solidify what we're going to be lifting and the progressions that we're going to be working on for the next 4 or 5 microcycles, which are 1-week cycles, right? Yeah. Awesome. Well, look, before we get into the sort of science and some of the research that we're going to talk about today, we're going to, why don't we both share our introduction or into intermittent fasting and how we sort of adopted it, and I'll share mine first because it kind of leads into probably what you're going to share. 3.5 years ago, my partner and I had our first child, and that was also coinciding with the point where I was pushing into my mid-30s and or going beyond my mid-30s. And as a lot of young parents or new parents do, you sort of put on a bit of weight. Men can put on what's referred to as sympathy weight, and that's a legit thing. They've researched that. When your woman is putting on a bit of weight, you want to make her feel a bit more comfortable. After we had our son, Kobe, we both struggled to lose the weight. And obviously for Kalisha, it was things related to her pregnancy. But for me, it was interesting. I started doing all the things that I'd done before to stay quite lean. And I was really struggling to lose about 8 kilos that I put on. And I went back to the drawing board and I started to think, okay, I'm going to have to do something that I've never done before because what I have done before is not working. And I started to investigate sort of radical nutritional interventions, and intermittent fasting just kept coming up as a suggestion from my inner circle. And I gave it a try, and it worked remarkably well for me. Within 12 weeks, I lost all of that weight, and it just worked for me. It felt good. We'll talk more about that in a sec. So then Kalisha wanted to try it. She successfully followed intermittent fasting for 12 weeks and lost all of her baby weight that she'd put on. And then we started to roll it out across the board in our gym. I picked a handful of clients from different age demographics, and we rolled it out with them with raging success. To that point, we still hadn't had anyone who struggled on it. And then I really started to... I guess you can fill me in, inspire you guys or whatever else.
Yeah. Well, I didn't want you to have one up on me, so I started doing it, and the rest is history. I don't even remember when that was. Just over a year ago.
No, it was longer than that.
I don't think so. I don't think I've been doing it for more than a year.
Really?
I don't think so.
Interesting. Well, I've been doing it for
you. Was
3 years? Yeah.
What?
Well, yeah, 6 months after Kobe was born.
Okay, well, I started only 3 months after you.
That's the point. It's been a couple of years, man. Like, if you think about when Link and stuff was doing it with me years ago, that was years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, he's been over in the States for almost a year.
We're getting old.
That's right. Anyway, so talk about your experience, because for me it worked very well, and I'll go into more depth about that in a sec. But what did you experience from intermittent fasting?
Oh, probably the biggest hidden benefit that most people don't talk about is increased penis size.
I could see a joke, somewhat resembling a joke coming there.
I mean, that was the biggest thing that I noticed.
Just check the.
I think the biggest.
We look quite pale.
The biggest thing that I am surprised by is that I've put on muscle from intermittent fasting.
Yep.
Guaranteed. Everyone says it. intermittent fasting, I mean, we're always changing our program, and it evolves what we do. That's how the FMS works. It evolves, and we periodize, and things change. But the only thing that really was the biggest dramatic change in my life was that I started intermittent fasting.
Yep.
I don't take maybe I take more supplements than some people. I was going to say than the average person. I don't take more supplements, but we don't have pre-workouts. We don't have BCAAs. We don't have 90% of the shit that I see in supplement stores when I walk in there. We just have glutamine, creatine, a green supplement, protein, and what's the fifth one that we have at the back there? Maca powder.
Maca.
And then beyond that, if I get sick, I have some, vitamin C or whatever, a multivitamin. But so nothing changed there. But I started intermittent fasting, and I got really lean, and my body started changing. My body physically looks different since I've done intermittent fasting.
Yeah.
I don't weigh any more or less on the scales, so I don't know what a DEXA scan would show, but you can see it and I can feel it.
Yeah.
And people have commented. People say to me when they see me without a shirt, and they go, "Shit, you look amazing."
Yeah.
And
an important thing to say for those of you who don't follow us, who might have tuned in for this show, Rad's 41.
I turn 41 next month.
Turns 41 next month. So yeah, it's unique, or it's not very common to be gaining a lot of muscle mass at 41 years old. Your big bang for your buck window of opportunity to gain muscle mass is pretty well documented. As for a male, it's 25 to 35 years old, and after that, it gets harder and harder, and in many cases, very, very difficult. So. Yeah, it's a big deal, and that's one of the questions we're going to be answering here. So let's, first of all, we'll talk about what the hard facts say about intermittent fasting, and then we'll go into what our experiences are, because unfortunately, to date, a lot of the really, really good, compelling research has only been done on animals. Sachin Panda's doing a lot of this research in his lab, and he's doing most of it on mice because it's very, very hard. We said this in our last vlog on intermittent fasting. It's hard to do research on humans. It takes time. It takes a lot of money, and to date, we're still waiting for a lot of this stuff to be validated on humans. But we can give you what the research says, whether it's animal or human study, and then we can give you what we've experienced, So the first one there, Sachin Panda has got some very compelling evidence that in mice, it does increase lean mass, which is what Rad's sort of referring to there. We still don't have any, to my knowledge, we don't have any really, really compelling data on humans, but we can certainly advocate that it's worked for us.
Yeah.
So combined with a lot of exercise as well, we do our foundation movement system, which certainly helps. The next one is that we do know absolutely, which we spoke about in the last vlog, is that it upregulates cellular autophagy, and that's really important. Now, it's not the only thing that does. Exercise itself upregulates cell autophagy. So does being in calorie deficit. And cell autophagy is linked to, a failure of cell autophagy is linked to most degenerative diseases, and it's also linked to aging. So it's a really, really important process within our cells where the body is able to identify components that are damaged, repair them, and excrete the byproducts of that process. So we certainly want to be upregulating cellular autophagy. Rad's sitting there with a blank look on his face because I guess there's not that much he can add to that point. But that's what the science says. Now, our personal experience, why don't you share the story of Anthony Minicello?
Yeah, so Anthony Minicello, for those of you that aren't Australian, if you're Australian and you don't know who Anthony Minicello is, you've probably been living under a rock for a while. But if you're not Australian, you probably don't know who he is. He's one of the most decorated NRL stars in Australia, which is the National Rugby League, which is the
equivalent to the American
I was
football.
going to say it's the biggest football league in Australia, but it's probably not. It's probably equivalent. It's probably matches the AFL, but it's close, the highest level of football in Australia. It's I guess for Americans and Europeans, it's similar to rugby, what you guys would know as rugby, but it's an Australian version of it. And he was one of the highest, most decorated players, most what's the word I'm looking for here? Highest achieving players.
He was one of them, yeah. He one of them. He's up there.
He was up there. And
he'd represented the country. He'd represented state. We have this thing where state goes against state. It's called the state of origin. And Anthony was
that's the biggest NRL game every year. Yeah. But so the story is, I know Mini because he is when he did his injury that I'm going to describe. He did it. He went and rehabbed with one of my best friends, and who's also a friend of Yanni, Aaron McKenzie. You can look him up at Origin of Energy, and he's a good friend of mine. We went to school together. We lived together. He's a very close friend. Anyway, so Mini fractured his spine, and he had to get surgery on it, and then down in his lower back, and then he fractured his spine again in his neck, and had to get surgery on it.
This is all while playing league. It's a pretty brutal game.
It's very.
It's like think NFL without the helmet and massive shoulder pads.
Yeah, it's full.
They pretty much do the
and
same sort of thing.
They line up against each other. You can't pass forward in NRL like you can in NFL.
Yep.
So the way it works is there's two lines of guys and they just bash against each other. It's very hard hitting. Anyway, he got an MRI of his entire spine, and the surgeon told him that you basically have to stop NRL straight away, that if you take one more hit. When I spoke to Minnie and he told me the story himself, he said he was out training and the physio ran out on the field and yelled at him and said, "Get off the field now," because there was a floating piece of his vertebra that was about 1 millimeter away from hitting his spinal cord, and that could have turned him into a quadriplegic. And he basically had to recondition his entire life. But he healed the injury. So long story short, he completely healed himself through exercise, doing similar stuff to what the Foundation Movement System is, and also through intermittent fasting. But this is what really blew me away. He said he went in and there was a fragment of his spine that was floating when he got an MRI, and they said they needed to operate on him, and it was just when he started intermittent fasting, and he said, let me just see what happens. And he went back 6 months later with no pain. He got another MRI, and the fragment of the spine wasn't there. So what had happened was, the only way that they could that science could explain it is that his body had metabolized the fragment of the spine. It had basically metabolized it and broken it down and put it back through the system. And medicine can't explain that. There's not enough research out there on intermittent fasting to explain it. But the process that Yanni's just described of cellular autophagy, which is where when the body goes into a state of heightened cellular autophagy, what happens is it puts this is my explanation of it. This is Rad's layman explanation of what happens. You stop. The body stops putting all its energy into digestion, which takes a huge amount of energy, and it starts putting its energy into other things. And cellular autophagy, this process of the cells duplicating themselves at a higher level,
healing themselves.
Is what's happened, and he managed to metabolize a fragment of his spine.
Obviously, and if there's any science Nazis
hang on.
there.
Let me just finish quickly. The other thing is as well, when he got the MRI, all of the discs in his spine were black, and the surgeon looked at him and said, "You're in a really bad way." And he said, "Why?" And he said, "The discs in your spine are meant to be white on an MRI. They're meant to look white, which means they weren't getting any circulation to them.
They weren't getting fluid."
And through intermittent fasting, when he went back and got his follow-up MRIs, they were white again. Yeah. They'd gone white.
Obviously, we can't prove that that's because of intermittent fasting, and Anthony Minicello was doing a lot to improve his health. Training with Aaron McKenzie at Origin of Energy certainly was helping, because he had a very balanced program. Cut out a lot of shit from his lifestyle, cleaned his lifestyle up, and really just doubled down on his health. So for the science Nazis out there, yes, full disclaimer, we're not saying here that intermittent fasting is going to repair all injuries and things like that. We don't have any proof of that, but we do have stories like that. We've got our own stories, of us. We've suffered quite severe injuries, and we've found that our bodies feel better when we're intermittent fasting. So you've got the science backing that it upregulates cellular autophagy, and it does it more so than just a caloric restriction diet, and it does it more so than exercise. When you combine exercise and intermittent fasting together, there are quite remarkable things occurring in the body. We do know that. What else we do know, and this is very well backed, and Dom D'Agostino will rave about this. He's probably the keto godfather, but he's also a very big advocate and proponent of intermittent fasting. And he he's very, very vocal about the concept of it improving metabolic flexibility, meaning that our bodies can transition from primarily using carbohydrate and glycogen as our fuel source over to using fat and metabolizing fat as our fuel source. Now, Sachin Panda has also proved that it increases fat oxidation in animals, and I believe that it does the same thing in humans, but there's a caveat to that. Like, you obviously, no matter what nutrition system or diet you go on, the diet very rarely fails. And I want to go into more depth about this in a sec. It's the person who fails the diet. And if you're intermittent fasting and you're doing a 12-12 or a 10-14 or a 16-8, you can certainly fuck it up in the window where you eat again. So you've still got to go in with the right mindset. But I believe, it's yet to be proven that it does improve fat oxidation in humans, but it certainly does in animals, and it certainly does improve metabolic flexibility, which is that ability to switch between metabolic substrates, fats and carbohydrates, or glycogen if you want to get more scientific. Now, what we've found on a personal level, and I believe this is probably the most compelling reason to take up intermittent fasting. Rad and I have trained people for 16 years, and for the vast majority of that time, we focused on weight loss clients, right?
Yeah.
Now, one of the biggest problems, and the reason why we no longer...
We didn't focus on it. It's just what the biggest in the market was there.
It was the majority of people that came to us wanted some form of body composition improvement or enhancement, and most of it was weight loss. Now, that was also because we worked at Fitness First Gym, which is essentially a weight loss gym, I guess you'd say, Now, the biggest problem with people losing weight is their adherence to a lifestyle intervention around diet. Most people can join a gym and start working out, but very few of them can follow through with what they eat. Now, what we've found with intermittent fasting, and I'll get you to share your experiences with this in a sec, is that it dramatically increases your relationship with food. It improves your relationship with food because you're no longer tethered to food, for one, and we spoke about that in the last vlog. You don't have to eat every 2 to 3 hours like we used to do when we were into bodybuilding, or at least me. But it also forces you to practice cognitive restraint so that you have to prolong your eating window, and that exercises your ability to be uncomfortable and to deal with hunger pains and to disassociate from those things. And that is going to help you across anything that you try and do, How have you managed your hunger pains, and how have you found that it helps to improve your, ability to just go without food? You're tethering to food.
Well, I think that one of the biggest problems that people have in modern day life is a lack of discipline. And it's something that absolutely has to be learnt. I was not a disciplined person when I was younger. People say to me, one of the things that people say to me all the time is, "Oh my God, you're so disciplined."
Yeah.
And I wasn't that way, but I learned discipline first in martial arts. Martial arts in Kung Fu taught me a lot of discipline, and then second in the army.
Yeah.
So I made a choice to do things that would teach me discipline, because I was drawn, like as a kid, you look up to, for me, I looked up to people like Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan and Jean-Claude Van Damme, and, I wanted to be able to do what those guys want to be able to do. And then when you can do, and then when you go to a class, you start being taught these things, and your teacher tells you need to be disciplined if you want to get those results. And so you start learning it. So it just makes sense to me that in that if you want anything in life, you need to be disciplined. Like, if you want to go to university and get a degree and get a good job afterwards, you have to be disciplined with what you do with your time so that you excel at what you do and you're not just somebody with a degree but no ability to implement, And so I think when you do intermittent fasting, so going back to your question, what did I do? How did I manage hunger pains?
What experience? Like, what did you get from it on a mindset level? I'm more flexible with my food. I've got a better relationship. Or, how did it change your mindset around eating?
Well, the first thing that happened for me, I did it just 2 days a week to start with. I did it on Monday and Tuesday, and I found it very, very hard. Like, I'd be looking at the clock now, thinking about food, knowing that my fast finishes in 2 hours, and I was really, really hungry, and I get hangry towards the end of that period, and but what I found is really, really quickly, like it took maybe 2 or 3 weeks, I started to notice that on the days when I didn't fast and I ate breakfast, I felt very sluggish. And that was a real surprise to me because I didn't think that I was sluggish before that, but on the days that I was fasting, I was really, really alert. And then as soon as I ate, and I still notice that today, as soon as I eat my first meal, I become sluggish for the next couple of hours.
Yeah.
Whereas when I'm fasting, I'm really alert. And what really blew me away, I noticed a couple of times that my reflexes were much faster. I really noticed it. Like in the morning, I remember I was just sitting there and you're in this morning state and something dropped off the table and my arm just went bang and just caught it. And I remember once or twice I looked at it and just went, oh my God, I can't believe how fast my reflexes are. And that was a really noticeable thing. And so for me...
And we know why that is. That's actually proven. Your body produces more epinephrine and norepinephrine, which are the adrenaline hormones. And it for a heightened sense of awareness, because when you're in starvation mode, your body is naturally, instinctively geared to prepare for a hunt now, So it's a really great little hack that you can tap into, which I certainly notice as well.
I notice. Yeah. I really notice it. And if I don't fast now, like as soon as I eat that first meal, you just lose it straight away.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. Like when you look at animals in the wild, like if you look at a carnivore, that like animals that hunt, not herbivores that graze all day long, because that's obviously completely different. But the carnivores that hunt, that do go through a fasting period themselves, however long that's for, I haven't looked into it at all. This is just my own observation. But you look at them when they're ready for a hunt, and you look at the look in their eyes and the body language of a couple of lions or lionesses that are out there hunting, and like how switched on they are and how switched on they look, versus the same lions just after they've had a meal.
Absolutely.
Like just after they've had a meal, they're just laying on the ground and they're rolling over and they look like they're half asleep, and
That's exactly right. And that someone said that. I don't know whether it was a podcast or I read it, but someone said, do you want to be a lion prepped for a hunt, or do you want to be a lion after they've had a meal?
Yeah.
How do you want to spend your day? Literally. Yeah. Because it comes down to that. For me, that's everything, Do you want to be that lion that's fucking ready to take on anything and chase down a gazelle, or do you want to be the lion who's just eating the fucking gazelle lying in the sun, just going, fuck,
and you can see that with all carnivores. All carnivores are like that. When they're hunting, they are really switched on and they're really ready for it. And herbivores are obviously, kind of on edge at all times because they're going to get eaten. But
vegans.
Yeah. But
sorry, no.
But that was my experience with it, and that made me go to 5 days real quick because I just felt it, and I was doing it 2 days a week just to. The main reason I did it was just to be able to experience it, and we don't like to teach anything at Unity Gym that we haven't experienced ourselves. We don't like to teach things that we've just read about. We like to teach things that we've tried ourselves and we can say, yep, this does this. And that's why I did it, but then I just felt amazing. I felt amazing from it. It was a big thing. Can I just quickly answer someone's question?
Yeah, absolutely. Just quickly time check, because I do have a bit I want to get through today.
We're out of time, mate.
Yeah, really? Okay. Answer the question. I want to go through a couple of these questions here.
Okay. So Marcus Denny, who's one of our online tribe members, has asked, should someone like him who's got a super fast metabolism, Marcus is an ectomorph, should he do intermittent fasting? And then he's written at the end, I know you guys aren't nutritionists, and he's given us a winky face. Marcus, I would say I would do intermittent fasting if I was you, purely for the growth in penis size. That would
oh mate, every time. No, look, it's a really great question, because I'm an ectomorph, Richard's an ectomorph, and it's very hard for us to put on muscle mass as opposed to a mesomorph or an endomorph. Now, Rad's a bit more of a mesomorph than us. I still advocate intermittent fasting, Marcus, and I think it's just so that the benefits, like on a longevity standpoint, are just so compelling that I would absolutely do it. But it just means you've got to be really, really good at getting your calories and protein in during your refeed window. Now, one of the cool things about intermittent fasting is that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach to eating. There are all these different types of fasting. We start people off, as Rad said, on the 5-2, where for 2 days a week we do a fast for 16 hours, then we refeed, and then we start to integrate them over to a 12-12, then a 14-10, then a 16-8, and then periodic 24-hour fast. And some of my guys I've even taken up to 72-day, 3-day and 5-day fasts once a year, just because that's when some really, really amazing things start to click over in the body. And they've even started to prove that in mice, one of the other things that Sachin Panda's proven is that it cures type 1 diabetic cells in the body when you fast, when you get an animal fasting for up to 5 days or more than 5 days, which is amazing. And it'll be interesting to watch this space, whether they can replicate that in humans. But we do know that it definitely improves your insulin sensitivity, and therefore massively benefits people with type 2 diabetes if you fast for a few days. Now,
Yanni, why don't we do a whole show on this stuff? Because we are out of time by 2 minutes. We're over time. Why don't we just do tomorrow's show on it? Because otherwise it's going to be really rushed.
All right, yeah, okay. All right, I've got a couple of things that I want to answer. Does intermittent fasting increase testosterone? Does intermittent fasting build muscle? Does intermittent fasting stunt growth? Does intermittent fasting cure diabetes? And does intermittent fasting burn fat? These are all questions that are really commonly being asked of us.
So let's do a show on it tomorrow.
Okay, all right. We'll do another intermittent fasting show tomorrow. It seems like that's...
a lot of people are into it, so we're getting a lot of questions asked about it. So we'll, rather than rush through those really common questions, let's do them properly.
All right, cool.
So we'll do that for you guys tomorrow.
All right, guys. Well, look, I hope that you got something out of today's show. We'll continue the discussion tomorrow. We'll keep crushing it. For all of those doing the FMS program, get your testing in, be ruthless with your form and technique, and get ready for another big program cycle. Second quarter of the year, folks. Let's crush it.
See you soon, everyone.
We are the gym that teaches people how to move instead of just exercise, because we believe that health is about performance, not just body image.